So David Seymour, Deputy Prime Minister on Herald NOW this morning, told us it's a victory for common sense and against mob rule. This is in relation to New Zealand deciding at the weekend not to recognise a Palestinian state. Winston Peters made that clear at the UN. Joining us is Geoffrey Miller, Geopolitical analyst. Geoffrey, good morning.
Good morning, Ryan.
Well, first of all, what do you make of David Seymour's comments?
Look, there's a lot of polarisation with this issue. If you've looked at social media over the weekend, you'll see plenty of people in favour of decision and a lot of people against it. And there's not much in between. And I think you saw the Israeli reaction to this decision. Sharon Haskell, the Deputy Foreign Minister, said that it was an act of moral courage and common sense. And those words, common sense, are being reflected there with David Seymour as well. So it's very much a division here, which I think is a shame, because I don't think this necessarily should be a partisan issue. And I don't think it was until the weekend. I think National in particular and Labour were quite closely aligned with their positions on Gaza and on the war. And New Zealand really has broken ranks here on this decision. It has moved away from the likes of Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom. These are countries with which New Zealand stood quite closely over the past 18 months, almost 2 years since this war began. It has issued many joint statements with those countries and had held quite close relations with those countries in terms of the war in Gaza. So it is a surprise in that sense.
Does that not, therein lies the point, Geoffrey, the war in Gaza, as opposed to the practicalities of recognising a Palestinian state for which there is currently no elected government?
Look, I take your point, but I think the issues are inextricably interlinked here, Ryan, because the whole point is, why are countries looking to recognise a Palestinian state right now? Well, it's because Israel is doing its utmost to make a Palestinian state impossible. And Benjamin Netanyahu, who spoke some hours before Winston Peters at the UN in New York, said that it would be national suicide to allow the creation of a Palestinian state ever. So Israel is totally against a two-state solution. The United States is backing it up on that. And New Zealand, I think, will then be seen in that category, even if that wasn't Winston Peters' intention. He said, Winston Peters, at the UN, that it's a case of when, not if, for New Zealand's recognition of a Palestinian state. And he made some good arguments. I mean, some of these arguments have merit, that there isn't a state to recognise, there's no viable state, in the conventional sense of recognition of states. Winston Peters' arguments make some sense. But I think in the end, New Zealand will just be an absent dot on the map. And there's an ever diminishing group of countries that do not recognise a Palestinian state. 157 states out of 193 now recognise one. New Zealand will be one of the outliers from here on in, unless New Zealand changes its mind, perhaps recognises a Palestinian state in the coming months, years. Who knows?
All right, Geoffrey, very quickly, I want to get your hot take on the drone situation. They haven't come out and said, the Europeans, this is categorically Putin and Russia, but who else is it, The drones, we've got the fighter jet incursions. It's happening not just in Europe, but Alaska. They've been doing that for months, but again, over the weekend, and the Americans coming to intercept. What's Putin's game plan here?
Well, look, there are a lot of claims and counterclaims flying around. I think we've got to be really careful with looking at these. We've got to find some evidence. When it comes to the drones in Denmark, there's still no evidence at all that Russia is behind them. There's a lot of conjecture. And you have to remember those drones over New Jersey and the United States at the end of last year, the drones above Gatwick Airport in 2018. There have been various scares like this in the past.
So you're calling conspiracy?
The one that is real and is substantiated were the drones over Poland that were shot down, some of them by Nato. And look, that is concerning, because it's an escalation and we need to de-escalate on this front. We do not want this war getting out of hand, getting even worse. Look, one war is bad enough in the Middle East. The war in Ukraine grinds on. Look, it's a desperate situation for the world geopolitically, and we need cooler heads here. We need more diplomacy, more de-escalation, more dialogue, because we could end up with a declared war between NATO and Russia instead of just an undeclared one, and it would just spell disaster for the world.
Exactly.